Welcome, backgammon enthusiasts, movers and shakers, to the world of backgammon. Today is Wednesday, the 17th of April. This is a Stream Team Studio exclusive in tandem with the WBIF. Live in the studio, we have Eric McAlpine from the UK. From Italy, Mr. Gian Lazzaro Sana. Greetings, Mr. Sana.
Hi Eric. Hi everyone.
From Bulgaria, Mr. Božidar Iliev. Greetings, Mr. Iliev.
Hello, Eric. Hello, everyone listening to this exciting, I hope, interview.
An introduction to our esteemed guests. From Austria, the creator, founder, and president of the World Backgammon Internet Federation. The Honourable Gentleman and Backgammon Grandmaster, Bernhard Meyer. From South Africa, Deputy President of ESWF, Member Nations and International Relations, Chairman of the International Federation of Esports, Puzzle and Mind Games, ESWF Metasports Ambassador, Leonard Loftus. ESWF stands for Esports World Federation. I would like to take this opportunity to invite into our studio Mr. Bernhard Meyer and Mr. Leonard Loftus. Hi, Bernhard.
Hi, Eric. Hi, all. I'm excited about today's interview and issues because cooperating with the Esport World Federation is, I think, really something very exciting for our future, for the mind sport and backgammon.
Here. And hi, Leonard.
Good day, everyone. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be part of your panel of discussion for the session.
Every good wish and a pleasure to have you with us. My question is to Leonard. It would be nice if you would share with us and our viewers a little background on the Esports World Federation and what are the aims and objectives of the ESWF.
Thank you very much, sir. Yes, I'm with the Esports World Federation for the last 18 months. And what is interesting about the Esports World Federation is normally the people view, the Esports World Federation as also, stopping with the first word of the federation with esports, but it goes beyond that. The Esports World Federation is also the governing body of the Meta movement. And the Meta movement is an all-inclusive organization as part of the Esports Federation, including all aspects and disciplines of, with regard to indigenous games, recreational sports, traditional sports, also then including electronic or cyber sport, and multicultural sport. And I can just give a short background. We are busy preparing for the upcoming African Esports Cup, and with a lot of place in Africa that's doing a lot of mind game activities, especially with regard to online chess, online drafts, online checkers, and so on. And then we also decided to include online backgammon with regard to the World Backgammon Internet Federation with President Bernhard Meyer from the World Backgammon Federation. So we're very excited to include backgammon as officially being part of the first esports event in Africa, being part of such a big magnitude, as also including the Meta movement. That's also relating to the Meta games and the Meta sports. So we're very excited to include mind games in the form of backgammon also in our events for the very first time. So that makes our federation very unique, that we go beyond only including esports. That in short.
Thank you very much, Leonard. Over to you, Jan Lazaro.
Leonard, could you give some insight into what is an esport with a general definition?
Thank you, sir. Yes, esports is, the full definition is electronic sports. That's the generic side of esports is relating to all the type of video games that one receives that's being played on console, mobile, PC, personal computer or laptop. So that's basically in short what esports entails. If I can give an example, like the games of Dota 2, Street Fighter, racing games, football games, etc., etc. But as I just mentioned, the exciting part is that we also include as governing body all the other sports. So we are actually a platform at this moment that's incorporating all the other aspects. But that's the short abbreviation or discussion of what esports entails is basically the video games as we know throughout the years.
Thanks, and back to you, Eric.
Thank you, Jan Lazaro. Over to you, Bojida.
Thank you, Eric. I'd like to start with a question to Bernhard. How do you think backgammon will improve as a sport, being in partnership with the Esports World Federation, Bernhard?
I think I see now already with the first tournament which we are organizing together, which is part of the Esports Cup in Africa, that it's a very good cooperation. We have 256 players and 45 nations, and the Esport World Federation will help us to get much more audience, to be much more represented in Africa and Asia, in many nations where till now backgammon was very strong in Europe and of course in Japan and in USA. But there are many regions where we in Africa, for example, we have just three member nations, yeah. But at the Esport World Federation, they have already 50 member nations in Africa. So the idea and the beauty of the game backgammon will be spread all around the world much better with the help of the Esports World Federation. This is for me a very important aspect. And the Esports World Federation is very inclusive, and I also like this aspect. When I was asking how do you treat the different nations and problems with nations which are in war, they told me for them these are all individual players, and as I heard in the interview with Nona Gambardashvili, the Georgian world champion from former days, when she said there are no good and bad nations, there are just good and bad people. So I'm really happy that the Esports World Federation is very open and not fixed on some kind of structures or political issues like the International Olympic Committee, for example, or also like it is at FIDE. I like this approach, which is very democratic in my opinion very much.
Thank you, Bernhard. And now I have a question to Leonard Loftus. In comparison to other global esports organizations, is it only the ESWF, including mind sports like chess, Go, or backgammon and card games?
Yes, at the moment, we are the first organization to include mind games. We were put to the question in one of our meetings with the member nations of Africa, and they requested that we also look at the possibility of including, and we embraced it because, as I mentioned earlier on in the discussion, that the Esports World Federation is not only dealing with electronic or esports, but also embraces all other sports under the Meta movement. So this was a very unique opportunity for us to include mind sports or mind games, with regard to online checkers, online chess, drafts, and also now online backgammon. We are also looking at the prospects of including online Sudoku and Scrabble as well. So at the moment we are catering for that because of our policy structure that allows for that under the Meta movement. So that's perfect. That's a very unique system that we are going to pilot in this upcoming event in Africa. And what we also want to do is we will also include the various mind sports, with regard to all the other regional and continental, not only with regard to meta games, but also with regard to other esports for all events, because that will just broaden the landscape for us. But, with regard to the other international esports federations, they are primarily focused on the generic esports, if I can call it like that, like the fighting genres or MOBA or first-person shooter and so on. So they primarily focused on pure esports, and we've got a broader perspective that we want to approach, that we want to serve, and whereby we can provide a lot more opportunities for athletes from other disciplines to also get the opportunity to participate.
Thank you very much, Leonard. Back to Eric.
Thank you, Bojo. Over to you, Jan Lazaro.
Yes, Leonard, you have partly answered to my new questions, but could you give us a few examples of mind sports that can be fully considered esports?
Yes, with regard to the Esports World Federation being the governing body and IP holder of the Meta movement, with regard to, we call it Meta Sports, and that's going to be played under the Meta games as well. Currently, we are identified online chess, online checkers, online drafts, and then of course online backgammon. Then we also looked at online Sudoku and online Scrabble. So we created this platform now, especially after with actually coming from the pandemic period, that with online and also with logistical issues, some of the country members that can participate don't have finances or capabilities that can travel to far destinations to participate in traditional or actual physical events. Now they've got the opportunity to participate in their specific disciplines, which they love and play throughout many years, to participate in actual world-class events. International events that give them status and recognition. So that's what we identified with regard to the first league of our mind sports activities. That's also being played online on an online basis or platform.
Can I add another question to Jan Lazaro's card games? I think there are so many exciting card games. Are you thinking about also including card games?
Yes, most definitely. With regard to the we've got a section that is also visible on the official website of the Esports World Federation. They call it, I think they call it genre specifics, and there is a position for they call it collectible card games. But yes, that's also going to be. I did approach one of the card games international federations as well to see if they are willing to also participate in our events. So yes, President Meyer, we are definitely open for any online strategic games to participate within the mind game section.
A question for Bernard. Do you think backgammon can be recognized as a sport in the future?
This is a classic question for me. Yes, I'm sure, and we are working on this. I think the first step is that backgammon is established as mind sport. And since years, our aim was to apply at IMSA, at the International Mind Sport Association, till 2025. Maybe we'll postpone it to 2026. But I think this is the first and most important step to be accepted worldwide as a mind sport. And I think with this cooperation with the Esports World Federation, these categories of mind sport and physical sport, I think they are slowly starting to disappear, yeah, because anyhow in esports everything is a bit more familiar. No matter if I play football online or car races or backgammon, it is obvious. Also in chess, at chess tournaments, they show now how is your blood pressure, how good is the air in your room, how is your heartbeat. So people see that also mind sport is a very, very hard physical activity, and people have to have a lot of physical power to be good and flexible and strong in the mind over several days or several hours. So I think first step is being accepted as mind sport, and the step to be accepted as sport is not so important anymore.
Thanks, Bernard. And back to you, Eric.
Thank you, Jan Lazaro. And I have a question to Leonhard. What are meta sports and what impact do they have worldwide?
Thank you very much for the question. Yes, meta sports falling under the meta games and the meta movement. The meta movement was created, as a new alternative to the Olympic structures, because the Olympics is basically sometimes, limited according to its constitution. Then we created, or President Arneel, actually, he's the founder of the meta movement. He identified the need for, all other traditional games, indigenous sports, multicultural sports, and so on. Besides, esports or electronic sports, that's also part of the meta. If I can just mention meta, MEIT, the M is for multicultural and indigenous sports. The E is for electronic and cyber sports. The T is for traditional and mind sports, and the A is for advanced and feature digital games and sports. So, with regard to that, we are embracing all sports, and a lot of the sports is disappearing because they are just seen as minority sports, and with regard to that, we reach out to all the countries in the world to identify these indigenous or multicultural sports that's slowly disappearing, to still keep them alive, to keep them abroad, and to give them an opportunity to be recognized on the international level, to also participate in events. So every biannual year, every 2 years, there will be Meta Games. The first one that's going to be launched in Hong Kong. We are in discussion with the government of Hong Kong and the media outlets in Hong Kong as well. So we're looking very forward to that. And with the inclusivity of mind games into the meta sports, we're very excited to give them some recognition as well. That's basically it. That's if it's a definition with regard to meta sports, that's in short a summarized version. And what I will also do is, President Meyer, I will also share a slideshow presentation. I think I did share it with you. Mr. Chris from Canada will also do some updates on that. We recently also included robotics, artificial intelligence, automation, and drone soccer as part of the meta sports movement as well. So there's a lot of advanced games included into this that, in the past, they were also, being viewed as minority sports. And all of them is running to be recognized by the Olympics. But the Olympics, as I mentioned, is limited to its constitution. So each and every 4 years, looking at the summer, or let's say every 2 years, with the summer and the winter Olympics, only 2, 3, or 4 sports at the most is being included. And some of the other traditional sports like baseball was included into the disciplines of the Olympics, but now it's being pushed down again. So it's not part of the Olympics in France. That's here in Paris. So it started to disappear again. But we created the platform through the Meta movement to include all those sports, to make them visible, to make them part. So currently, we are having a very big international network where we discuss all the sports around the world globally together as an executive of the Esports World Federation, as the governing body for the Meta movement and the Meta sports. So that's our focus point, to give more recognition to all the sports, existing sports, and embrace them and include them in our annual events. And just to close the discussion on this point, the Esports World Federation is catering not only for esports for all events, but also Meta movement events. So we are going to do maybe 20 events per annum, where other international esports federations, as I mentioned, focus specifically on generic esports, and they have maybe one world championship event per annum, where we are going to do a lot of events to cater for all the disciplines that we are embracing and including. That's just in short what I want to mention with regard to Meta Sports.
Thank you very much, Leonard. Over to you, Bozidar.
Thank you, Eric. My next question goes to Leonard. How do you see your future collaboration with the World Backgammon Internet Federation, and what is your expectation?
I think our outreach to the World Backgammon Internet Federation is very positive. I think backgammon will be a large component for us, especially in coming, from Europe. and maybe give them the recognition to lead the meta movement in Europe for us, and being part of the mind games as well. Especially being online discipline for us, that will add a lot of value. And as President Meyer explained earlier on, what we want to do from the Esports World Federation side, especially from the meta movement, through our broad and extensive stakeholder basis, through international networks and so on. We're also looking at expanding the discipline and interest in backgammon. Might be traditional, might be online through a digital platform. We want to increase the popularity of this event and grow together. So I think that will be mutually beneficial, because backgammon will be one of our international disciplines as a sporting code under the Mind Sports arena, and then also expanding backgammon in the world. As President Meyer also mentioned, that in Africa, they've got about, I think backgammon is about 3 active members, but with the Esports World Federation, we currently have 50 countries that's members of from Africa, that's members of the Esports World Federation. So it will be easy for us to introduce backgammon to them, especially being online. And the broader community, from Africa, they love mind games, and they will easily fall in love with backgammon and approach it. I know that Ludo is also, actively, I know they play also with dice and so on. We are not very sure what's the limitations with regard to online Ludo, but yeah, that's also one of the areas that we're looking at in promoting with this other mind sports activities as well. So there's a huge market, especially with regard to chess. A lot of our members in Africa is part of FIDE, and that makes it easier for us. So in Africa, the generic esports is not so big in all the countries. In South Africa, we have about 25.5 million active esports players. I know that Nigeria and Egypt also have a lot of esports players, but the other countries, they are primarily focused on mind sports. So I think there's an open market for backgammon, to promote backgammon, through the Esports World Federation system and our members bases. And also globally, it's not only related to the continent of Africa. That will be beneficial for backgammon, but I think globally we can promote the event. And as I mentioned, the backgammon can be our leader for the meta movement in Europe. So that's a win-win situation.
Thank you very much. Back to you, Eric.
Thank you, Bosha. And over to you, Jan Ezra.
Leonard, more than 30 European nations already have some kind of esport federation. Does Esport World Federation plan any collaboration with this?
Yes. What we're doing is, as I mentioned earlier, the Esports World Federation, through the meta movement process, is looking at including all the other sports. We're not focused only on esports per se, the electronic sports version. A lot of these other existing you're talking about, let's talk about Europe now. You say there's about 30 odd institutions or federations for esports, they are primarily focused on esports, generic esports only. And we decided, let's create a system whereby we can include other sports as well, especially now with regard to online mind sports, to let them be part of this event. I think after the establishment of what we do, we are in talks with all the other esports federations. But as mentioned, we differ from them that we cater for other sports disciplines as well, not only esports. And they are focused on promoting esports only. And yeah, as time goes on, we will definitely embrace or engage more with them, and to tell them this is this is what we established, and this is what we've got in place, and can we work together on certain terms? If they endorse the meta movement and the meta games, and we don't have a problem. We respect them for what they do. But that's a difference. We want to cater for a bigger audience, to give more recognition and embrace more disciplines of sports that's being left outside, if I can call it like that. That's they're actually dying off because they feel that nobody is actually giving a recognition to them. So nobody participate anymore in some of these events, and we want to give an opportunity to those events. Yeah. So as I mentioned, we are open in discussions. We have discussions on a time-to-time basis, but as mentioned, the difference between them and the difference between us is that we are open-minded, to include a lot of other sports disciplines, and mind sports and so on. And they are only looking at the generic side of esports at the moment. So yeah, the relationship will be open, but I think just to explain, this is what we are busy putting our structures in place at the moment.
I have a question also to this, Leonard. Is the intention of the Esports World Federation to organize events on international or regional level, or is there also plans to organize events on the national level?
Yes, I think that's very important question and relevant question. I think what we want to do is, talking from Africa now, the continent, we do this event as this is a event is actually a very big event for the Esports World Federation, because there's 50 countries from Africa that's members that's involved with this event. But we decided to make the event an open event, not only for Africa. It's an African event, but it's open, especially looking at backgammon, that included a lot of countries outside of Africa to also participate in this event. So what we decided, what we will do after this African Esports Cup is to also looking at Africa again. Africa is divided into 5 regions by the United Nations. And what we want to do is we want to promote events in each of the regions, and if you do that, then the countries within each region will automatically become part. What we also did with the structure of the esports or the African Esports Cup is that we will have it online on a national basis, then a regional basis, and then the grand finale. And that's looking at the African countries. But coming back to your question, President Meyer, I think it's very relevant, and that's what we want to do. We're not going only to look at international events. We're also going to look at the continental, regional, and the national events, where there's events are going to be held in respective countries. So we're definitely going to do a lot more events, and that's where we can do a lot of development with regard to the inclusivity of various sports disciplines and so on. Because we recently identified, they call it IO in Nigeria. It's an indigenous game actually. It's also a mind game, but with regard to the recent All Africa Games held in Ghana, in Accra, there was about 7 or 8 countries from Africa that participated in that game. So that is the long forgotten games or sports that we slowly getting back into the system, promoting that. And let's say there's indigenous sports in some of the European nations, that's not being played outside of Europe, but now we have the opportunity to give recognition within national events, and then regional events, and then continental events, and then moving on to the international platform, where we're going to give a lot more exposure to these. I won't say minority sports, but let's call it minority sports in the sense of that they're not being played internationally. But if people become aware of certain sports, it will grow into interest on an international scale as well. And that's what we aim for, is to give exposure through national, regional, continental, and eventually the international, events.
Yeah, I like this idea also with these indigenous sports, because sometimes ago I was looking at the oldest, at the board games of the world, yeah, and like the game of Ur or other ancient games, yeah, they try to find out the exact rules of these games, and like they didn't have dice, but they had sticks to throw, and there are really several of these games which can be played online. And so if there are competitions, I'm sure that there are many people all over the world greedy and happy to play and compete in these very old games also. So this indigenous sports, this is really a topic that I like very much.
Leonard, are there any possibilities of working with the International Mind Sport Association or the International Olympic Committee in the future?
Yes, sir. Like I mentioned earlier, we respect everyone for their viewpoints, what they want to achieve, and so on. So there will definitely be, in the near future, foreseeable future, there will definitely be a collaboration between, the existence of the meta games, the meta sports, the existing Olympic structures, and other esports federations. So eventually we will come to the platform where we are also busy discussing that we are busy arranging meetings again with the International Esports Federation. The current president is based in the UAE. He's one of the princes. I think it's important that the different spectrums of sports, recognize and respect each other. We respect them, and we hope that they will also respect us, what we are aiming to achieve. As I mentioned, that we want to give recognition to all the disciplines of sports. And President Arniel always mentioned that we are looking at approaching about 300 disciplines of sports internationally. But it's not a closed door. We're expanding all the time. And like President Meyer just mentioned now, that we are also looking at all this sports that's indigenous, multicultural that starts to disappear, to give them, a new sense of belonging, international platform. Yeah. But coming back to your question, sir, I think, there will be discussions. There will be, relationships that will be built. And, coming from a point of respect, mutual respect, I think, I think everyone will go for its objectives and aims, and most definitely there will definitely be relationships that's going to be built out of this.
Thanks, Leonard. And a question for Bernard. How important is, in your view, that backgammon is considered a sport?
I think for many work we do and we want to do in future is being accepted as mind sport. This is most elementary because this will open so many doors for us in cooperation. I saw this, for example, at the last BMAB tournaments in Germany, where there were really high-ranked people from the politic, and they really appreciated our approach, and there was no question that they already accept backgammon as a mind sport. So, and I mean, even now there are several nations where backgammon is accepted as mind sport in this part of the sport ministry as an accepted sport. So step by step, I think we will get to the point that it's worldwide a mind sport. And I hope that generally mind sport will be included in the infrastructure of the ministries of sport. So I think that in future there will not be the question: is this a mind sport or sport? Mind sport, sport. And that it will be accepted as mind sport. I'm very sure. It's just a question of years now.
Thanks, Bernard. And back to you, Eric.
Thank you, Jan Lazaro. I have a question for Leonard. The ESWF supports the first ever international backgammon tournament with sponsorship and generous prizes. What plans do you have for the future?
Yes, I think this first event will be actually our platform that we will be able to launch future events. And now with regard to sponsorships, sponsors or investors, they normally look at what interest are you able to create through hosting an event, for different disciplines. And as soon as they see that, it's not only countries from Africa for the African Esports Cup that's participating in this event, but various countries internationally. That makes the prospect for them, to get on board. We had a meeting recently with the Esports Trade Association in the United States, and they are very willing to get on board. One of their major sponsors is Coca-Cola for the international events, and they are going to do a big event in Chicago in July. And they already have 90 odd countries that will participate in that event. So they are also assisting, all the other, federations of sports around the globe, with sponsorship deals and so on. And with regard to the esports, fraternity or the electronic sports section being part of this, there are more than 3 billion esports players around the world, and through that, collaboration and partnership being part of the whole structure of the Esports World Federation at the end of the day, that will also bring a lot more sponsors and financial benefits for all the sports that participate in these events. And yeah, I think this will add a lot of benefit to athletes that will participate in these events and give them international recognition. So on that side, it's a very good initiative going forward, taking hands with the various mind sports sections and so on. So yeah, I think it's a very positive trend that we want to follow, and getting more people involved, stakeholders, investors, and companies, private investors. That will definitely, and I'm very positive that we've got a lot of good responses so far with regard to the upcoming African Esports Cup, being all inclusive, because that's part of our motto, is to be, equal, to be inclusive. We also have divisions for people with disabilities. So yeah, we're really embracing the whole industry of sports, bringing it together, with regard to the esports as well. And yeah, I'm looking forward to what's going to transpire out of this event.
Yes, and it does sound very promising, and I'm sure some backgammon players will be chomping at the bit to play in some of these events, and that leads into my next question. Do you think with the growth of the ESWF and esports that there may be a chance to hold some flagship tournaments played at a live location?
Yes. President Arnil also mentioned that, with backgammon being a real role player and a recognized discipline within the Esports World Federation system, the upcoming Metasports event, that will be the first event in Hong Kong, backgammon being part of the Esports World Federation, will most definitely invite through there. I think President Meyer will advise us on how they will elect or qualify the best players, and they will be invited to to attend the opening and closing ceremony in Hong Kong for the inaugural Meta Games. And what the plan is with regard to the Meta Games. It's normally held over a period of 7 months. So people will have the opportunity to play in their own destinations, may it be online or may it be a national, with regard to actual physical or traditional events. Give them the opportunity, to qualify and pick out the best. And those members go to the Hong Kong. What the viewpoint is from the Esports World Federation side is not only to, invest in major infrastructure like the Olympics that dish out billions and billions of dollars, just to equip event, that will serve as, as an Olympic village for about 16 days or so. And after that, that major facilities is end up like a white elephant, is not being maintained, and it also cost the host nation a lot of money to be allocated just to maintain that infrastructure developed for that event. Now the money generated from sponsors and investors and private companies will go directly back to the national federations and to the continental federations and to the representatives to rather invest in that specific countries. Give let's say for example, backgammon in Austria. to give to Austria that income, rather to just to build a big stadium or two, with a lot of investment going into that. Rather give it back to the nation, their athletes, their coaches, the referees, etc. And develop the different kind of sports within the different or respected nations or countries, and also the continental federations or the regional federations or the international federations for that specific sport discipline.
Well, sounds very promising. Thank you very much, Leonard. And over to you, Bozidar.
Thank you, Eric. Bernhard partly replied to my next question, but still, can you tell us, Bernhard, a little bit more about the first tournament on the WBIF that is organized in partnership with Esports World Federation?
Yeah, it is a kind of new challenge for us also, because first we wanted to host it from the 4th till the 12th May. But as we have had 256 participants, and it would have been even more, but we stopped it at this number because it's single elimination, and 256 is a good number. It's still like this, that our playing servers, it's difficult to host so many players on one evening. So we decided that the first 2 rounds, we still give, as we do usually, 1 week time to schedule. And with the daily rounds, we start with last 64. So there are 32 boards, and this is doable for the playing server. But if we are growing in future, we must have discussions how to host these tournaments on our servers when they are getting bigger and bigger. Because I think this first one we had to stop at 256 participants. But I expect in future we will reach, like at the individual world championship, 500 and even more players. So that's very exciting and promising.
Thank you, Bernhard.
Another point I want to say, if there is, as I understood, this closing ceremony in Hong Kong, and as we have already nice connections to Hong Kong and also Macau, I like thinking about the idea to try to organize a live backgammon tournament, which is at the same time like this closing ceremony in Hong Kong. Leonard, what do you think about this? I mean, it would be not a very big tournament, but it would be nice to do it at the same time.
I think it's a very that's a very good initiative, President Meyer. I think Mr. Tim Shen, who's part of the organizing committee, I think he will be at the end of the day the director of the tournament director of that event, and they will be very open to that because it will give a lot of exposure, not only to backgammon but to the meta games itself. To give. I won't say it's a demonstration, but it will serve as a demonstration at this event at the same time, because that will showcase. Yes.
So maybe we can connect the organizers there with our local tournament director, so we can push this idea a bit. Yeah.
Yes. I think it will work perfect. I think as time goes on, we will include you, President Meyer, also with discussions with Mr. Tim Shen from Hong Kong. He's also one of the executive board members of the Esports World Federation. And, going forward, especially with President Arnil, I think they will be very open, and not only backgammon, but I mean, other sports disciplines as well. I think checkers is not so big at the moment. To give them some exposure, maybe drafts and so on, coming from, especially representing, the mind games section. President, I think that will work perfectly.
Nice.
Thank you, gentlemen. Back to you, Eric.
Thank you, Bosho. Jan Lazaro, do you have any other questions you'd like to ask our guests or anything else you'd like to add?
Yes, just a quick question, but I think it is interesting. Bernard, can you tell us in which countries backgammon is already officially considered a sport?
Oh, I know that it's in Russia, yeah, and but I'm not 100% sure about other nations. I think in Hungary, for example, they are connected and have a good position with the ministries, and also in Romania and I think Bulgaria. But I would have to investigate to have clear facts, because at the moment it's so different in every nation. For example, in Austria, we have even a special kind of company which you can establish, which is called holding board and card games, which where the luck has just a small influence. Yeah, it's a very curious name of this, but and I think in some other nations it's totally forbidden. Yeah, so it's very strange and a bit wired at the moment. How many different? I think in Germany it's even like this, that from country to country in Germany they have different rulings and guidelines how to host tournaments like backgammon tournaments. So I think we should really go and make some Excel sheet with all the nations and the current legality of backgammon. It would be very interesting, yes.
Okay, interesting, and it is all for me. Back to you, Eric.
Thank you very much, Jan Lazaro. Boshida, do you have any questions or anything you'd like to add before I begin to close out?
Well, I have a last question, but before that, I would like to congratulate both our guests for this excellent initiative, and I can see a lot of opportunities for the future, and I'm happy that we have gone to this stage. So, last question to Leonard: how many are the Esports World Federation member players, and in how many esports do all these people compete?
Thank you. Maybe if you can just explain your question to me so that I just answer it correctly for you.
Yeah, well, my question is that because you are organizing, I mean, you are having a partnership with many sports, how many are approximately the players in playing under the in the sports within your organization, and how many are the sports you are partnering with?
Yes, looking at the from the event perspective, we've got about 10 continental and regional events. With regard to looking at the Asian countries, they divided into different regions. I think it's because of the enormous, the magnitude of the scale of, especially looking at esports for the moment now. They've got Southeast Asia, East Asia, South Asia, the Eastern Asia, and then there's Pacifics, including Oceania with regard to Australia, New Zealand, and the Pacific Islands, and then that's all by themselves, with regard to the Asian countries. Then we also have the African Continental Cup or the African continent for their event, and then we also have the Americas, with regard to North, Central, and South America, especially with the Latin American countries. And that's not including Europe as such. But I can just say there's millions and millions of players already, also with regard to our open platform to embrace through the meta movement and the meta sports, to include different kind of sports. As I mentioned earlier, that President Arniel is focusing on including, but not limited to 300 disciplines of sports. So we're looking at the big scale, and coming back to the explanation that I provided previously in our discussion, is with regard to the digital platform, it makes things a bit easier for us, and also adding to what Mr. Meyer also said, that I think what is wonderful with the Meta Movement initiative and the Meta Sports, as soon as because we are already engaging in Africa, we've got a good collaboration with the Minister of Sports Development in Nigeria, in Abuja, Senator John, and all the other countries in Africa is also now looking to follow this procedure. So it's also not only looking towards sports development, but in Africa we're also looking at advancing the technology sector, because I know that in the Philippines, Mr. Arniel is also he had a collaboration, or is also having a collaborative relationship with the Department of Science and Technology. So it's embracing a lot of avenues for us. So there's a lot of athletes from a variety of sports besides esports that's being so big. So it creates a lot of opportunities, and if we what we want to do with backgammon is if we include backgammon as one of our mind sports, then and a country embraces the Meta Movement, which I will, because we will be looking after all the various kinds of sports that's not being accommodated because of limitations by the Constitution of the Olympics. So that will make it easier for backgammon to automatically form part of the meta structures. So coming back to the question, there's a lot of members already that's part of this, and if you're welcome to visit the Esports World Federation website. I think President Meyer, you can share that website as well. If you have a look at that website, you will see there's various disciplines, various countries, and we are broadening the executive as well, so that we include a lot of national disciplines of sports, various sports. We've got a lot of stakeholders, investors, private investors, and that will serve as sponsors and so on. We've got you will if you look at the component, there's about 10 or 12 structures that's listed on the because there's also merchandise, licensing. It's a very broad component within the sports for today, the Esports World Federation. And it caused a lot of excitement, and we want to keep the momentum, going forward with this, getting into relationships, diplomatic relationships, especially looking back at Africa now as well. There's a lot of good relationship that's forming between the different governments, from countries in Africa, and that will make our role easier. That our objectives that we really want to achieve and really want to give back to the athletes at the end of the day, because they are the people that we need to look, after. They are actually the real promoters of sports for the various disciplines. But currently there's a lot of people involved with the Esports World Federation.
Thank you so much, Leonard, for all your detailed explanations and interesting information.
Pleasure.
And Bernhard, is there anything you'd like to add before I begin to close out?
No, I think we had so many details and discussion points. I have not something special to add now.
All right. So a big thank you to our special guests, Deputy President Leonard Loftus and to President Bernhard Meyer. Do keep an eye on Facebook and YouTube for some deeper insights and information coming from the President and founder of the Esports World Federation, Mr. Arnel Gutierrez from the Philippines. That's all, folks, and we look forward to seeing you in a while. And cheers!